So our speakers today, I'll put their names in the chat box, and I'll invite them to speak in this order. The first speaker will be Metiria Turei, who's a member of the New Zealand Parliament, and she's also a co-leader of the New Zealand Green Party. And she's been in politics for a long time and has a lot of experience, and I've worked with her last year when I was in New Zealand, and she's extremely inspiring and a wonderful person. Followed by her will be Maria, and she's the former spokesperson for the past 9 years in Sweden and is a former member of parliament. Followed by her will be Julia Duppre, who's a former parliamentary candidate in Rio de Janeiro for the Brazilian Green Party. And Robinah, she's from Uganda. She's a former parliamentary candidate in Uganda, and for the 2016 national election she'll be running again. And she sent her message in text, which I'll read for you all. She's unable to make it. Okay, so with that, I'd like to invite Metiria to speak to the topic of discussion, which is, we'd like to hear from each of you, to tell us about the challenges and various opportunities that you've experienced as a woman in green politics and inside the Green Party. Feel free to tell us about your personal journey, including some experiences you've had overcoming these challenges and seizing the opportunities in politics. So with that, please, I'd like to welcome Metiria.
Oh, kia ora. Kia ora koutou katoa. Very nice to be part of this forum tonight, so thank you for the invitation, and thank you to Kelly and Mark for your organisation. It's gone very smoothly, I think. I'm the co-leader of the Green Party in New Zealand, and I've been a Member of Parliament for 14 years. I was first elected in 2002. I come from a background of protest politics. I started my political activity in New Zealand with the unemployed rights movement in the late 80s and the early 1990s. After first the Labour and then the national government made major economic changes in New Zealand that led to very high unemployment, and not just that, but undermining of the welfare state that New Zealand had been built on. The welfare state was designed to make sure that families had the basics: decent housing, decent job, decent education and health. And much of that was eroded in those late 80s, early 90s by government decisions. I got involved in the unemployed rights movement, which was fighting against some of those government policies. And that was because, in large part, most of my family had been very badly affected by those policies, had been unemployed, had lost their homes, and really had no real hope that anything was going to change unless the political and economic policies changed. And so that was a period of, quite significant unrest in New Zealand, and it was the first time for me that I had been able to engage in the connection between the decisions that politicians make and the effect on the families that I belong to. And it was a very important experience of understanding how those two things were connected. I later, I was a solo mum for a short while, but I was able to go to law school in my early 20s, and I used state support to be able to do that. And that experience taught me not only about the law and how to engage with the political environment on its own terms, but also the importance of having that state support to be able to make things better for myself and for my daughter. I worked as a lawyer for a few years after I graduated, and then got involved with the Green Party because the Green Party had essentially elected to Parliament two people I had worked with in the past: Sue Bradford, who had been a part of the unemployed rights movement, and Nandor Tarklos, who I had worked with in the drug law reform movement to legalise cannabis. And that was the first time I saw at a political party that respected the sorts of issues and values that I had. It was the first time a political party had put people in Parliament who were people like me, who talked like me, who had similar life experiences to me, and who believed in the same things that I believed in. And that was shocking, actually. It was part of the MMP change from first past the post in New Zealand to MMP, so parties didn't have to win electorate seats, they could win seats in Parliament on as party lists. And it changed the whole way that I could engage with the parliamentary process. So I joined the party in 2000 and worked with the party on various levels on policy development and you know, on the national executive and a whole lot of other different bits to get to understand the party better. And then in 2002, I was on the party list for that election at number 8, and we got 9 MPs that year, and I was one of them. So it was I had a very quick introduction to Green Party politics. And as I say, it was because it was a party that reflected me and my family and my values. Since then, I became co-leader in 2009 and have been an MP for this whole period of time. We have a co-leadership model in the New Zealand Greens, so we always have a male co-leader and a female co-leader. It's a great way of structuring gender equity into our political organisation. It was certainly a challenge for the parliamentary system itself to have a political party with 2 leaders, and the system had to change a little to deal with the fact that we put gender equity as such a critical part of our identity, our political identity, that we had 2 leaders. And since then, at least one other political party has followed suit. The Māori Party has co-leaders, and we think that that's really good. We think that we're setting a great example to political parties on how they can change to improve their gender equity. There are challenges to being both a woman in Parliament, a Māori woman in Parliament, a woman as a leader of a political party. I think there is still a great deal of sexism in the system, in the parliamentary system that we work in, and misogyny often. But what I've noticed most about women in Parliament across the political spectrum is that we have to deal with this all the time, whether you're in business, whether you're in the community sector, whether you're in law like I was, or in politics like I am now. That there is always sexism and misogyny that you have to fight, and you find ways around that by working together and thinking differently and more creatively. But nonetheless, there are times when it is very challenging. Last year, I led a walkout in Parliament of both Green women and Labour women over our Prime Minister, accusing the opposition of backing, his phrase was backing rapists. It was an issue to do with New Zealanders being detained in Australia, and it was a completely unacceptable statement to be made by a Prime Minister as part of a political attack on the opposition who were questioning his actions in relation to those New Zealand detainees. And so I took personal exception to his phrase that we were backing rapists, and declared that as a person who had suffered a sexual assault, that I took personal offence and demanded that he withdraw and apologise. He didn't, and the Speaker didn't make him, and so a number of other women across the House stood and said that they too were offended by a statement and demanded that he withdraw and apologise, and a number of them were thrown out of the Parliament. And it was, in New Zealand, a critical moment for the country in seeing just how acute some of that misogyny, if you like, in the sense of using sexual assault as a political weapon to make a political point, was somehow considered by the Prime Minister to be the appropriate use of his parliamentary position. And it caused ripples both in New Zealand and in Australia as well. So, you know, despite us living in the 21st century and despite the many gains that women have made in politics, there is still a constant battle to hold the system and the rules to account for their ongoing support, if you like, for that kind of sexism and misogyny that we find in most structures. And so, yeah, it's, but that said, no, I'm running out of time. I'll finish with this. That said, you know, one of the great things about the Greens is that because we are so committed to gender equity, we're the only political party in Parliament that's ever had more women MPs than men in our caucus. We've put gender issues on the political agenda in New Zealand, and we continue to lead on that. So I'm very proud of the Green Party here in Aotearoa, as well as around the world, for making gender a serious political issue and fighting it in that arena. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Thank you so much, Metiria. You really make me feel proud to be a member of the Green Party for all that we stand for and we take action on. So I'll just pause here with you and move and invite to the next speaker, Maria Wetterstrand. Please help me learn how to say your last name correctly. I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly. And you have been the former spokesperson in Sweden for the Swedish Green Party and former member of Parliament. So likewise, when you speak, could you please turn on your video so we can feel as we're having a direct conversation with you. The floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you. I think my video is on, is it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm Maria Wetterstrand. I am former spokesperson of the Swedish Green Party. I was a spokesperson for 9 years. I was member of Parliament for 10 years, and that was, well, until 2011. So from 2001 to 2011, I was a member of the Parliament, and for 9 of those years, the last 9 years, I was also the spokesperson, co-spokesperson of the Swedish Greens. So I, as well as the Greens in New Zealand, was part of a two leadership cooperation between man and woman, and we were elected at the time when the Swedish Green Party was in a real crisis. We have a 4% threshold to reach Parliament, and at that time our opinion polls gave us like between 2 and 3% of the votes, and it was half year until the next election. So it was sort of a time of crisis for the Swedish Greens when we were elected spokespersons. And well, we managed to save the party when it comes to re-entering Parliament in 2002 elections, and well, we were quite happy about that, of course. And we started also that period to cooperate with the Social Democrats very closely. They were in the government, and we were sort of a outside the government coalition party, which is a typical Swedish way of doing politics. One party is in the government, and the cooperation is with parties that are outside the government but in the Parliament. So we were one of those parties, the Greens. So well, we managed to get quite a lot of politics out of the cooperation with the Social Democrats. Not all of it was very popular with the Swedes. We raised taxes on petrol, for example, which was not very popular, and on the oil that is used for heating houses. And we forced the Social Democrats to agree on imposing congestion charges or car toll system in Stockholm. Not very popular at first either, but actually was quite popular after a few months. And lots of other things that we managed to do during those years. So we sort of fought very hard to do real politics, not just being in opposition and complaining about what the government did, which I thought was actually what the Greens needed at that time, because people may have seen us a bit as more of a opposition party than a party that took part in the real politics. So we also had some luck during those years. Because there was a climate change issues coming up on the agenda in 2006, and that made us the center of the political discussion for quite a long time, actually. And I was the one that was most asked to come to the TV studios and talk about these things. So that made the Greens and also me, I think, quite popular in a way, even though the issues were of course difficult and not all the politics were very popular. But since we took that discussion quite seriously and we managed to drag the other political parties in our direction in some way, I think it made both me and the Greens a bit more popular than we were before. And of course also that people found environmental issues more important than they used to do, also made the party more popular than it was before. So, but something about me and my situation. During those years in Parliament, I had 2 children also during those years, and I was not a single mother, but I was like a single mother for the weekdays, because the father of my children, he lived in Finland, so he came to Sweden during the weekends and maybe a few days more. But most of the time I was alone with the children, so it was quite a hard work actually to get that managed. It seemed to me when I look back at the time that I spent more than half of my energy trying to organize the logistics so that me or someone else would take care of the children, and I could at the same time be a politician. So I stayed home for half a year with each of the children, and then their father stayed home for a few months also, which is, I must say, quite common in Sweden nowadays, that the fathers also stay home for a few months with the children when they are in the first year or when they are like 1 year old or something like that. So it was sort of challenging to get the family life and the political life working together. But I think the reason I managed to do that was that I actually said no to quite a lot of things during those years. I didn't go to a lot of evening meetings or weekend meetings actually, because I wanted to spend time also with the children. But when I worked hard and tried to make an impression when I did that. So in some way it sort of worked out. Someone said about me once, and that stuck in my head because I really liked it. It was a journalist, I think he said about me, he said that I was the first female politician in Sweden that was not considered a female politician, but just a politician, which I thought was quite the best compliment that you could ever get actually, as being a female politician. And I found sometimes that people were more prejudiced against Greens than women. And also the fact that I was quite young when I was elected. I was 27 years old when I became spokesperson, and then I was a Green, and then I was a woman. I think that actually that I was young and that I was a Green was more of a problem than being a woman in the Swedish politics. And that's because there were some young women before me that took quite a hard fight to be taken seriously in politics. And I must say they did more of the hard work than I had to do when it comes to that. But maybe I did some as well. I tried quite hard to fight the prejudices against both Greens and young people and women. For one thing, I thought very carefully about the way I dressed. I didn't want to dress as they expect a Green person to dress. I know this can be quite some people may not like it, that you adjust to the way that other politicians are, but some Green member that I spoke to said to me that you can be much more radical if you wear a suit. So I took that in, and I usually wore a suit, actually, gray suit. So then they would be a bit surprised that a Green person would look like that, and maybe they would listen a bit more to what I said, and maybe they wouldn't see that I was as radical as I was actually in my political opinions. I also took it very seriously not to hesitate saying my opinions about something, because I can notice sometimes that especially women have a tendency to say, well, I don't really know if I'm the person to say something about this, and I'm not an expert in this field, but, and so on. And I try to stop myself from doing that all the time, so I just got straight to the issue and said my opinions and did it as if I had been a man. So that maybe that would also kind of crash some of those prejudices that people have against young people and women. So I tried to sound as always as if I knew what I was talking about, even if I maybe not always did. But I guess the men, they don't always know what they are talking about either. So sometimes it's a question about attitude. And I could notice sometimes that since we were two spokespersons, that people, the journalists, maybe they would phone my co-spokesperson, Peter, a bit more, especially when it came to economical issues. Maybe the Prime Minister would phone him first and me only if he couldn't reach Peter. But I didn't get that annoyed about this because there were so many things other than me being a woman that that you had to take into consideration, like the fact that Peter was much more experienced and also quite a lot older than I was. And he also answered his phone all the time, which I didn't because I had the children. I didn't want to talk on the phone all the time when I was at home. So I was quite happy sometimes, actually, that he didn't phone me all the time. But I was the more popular one of us, so I guess that also made things a bit more equal. Sometimes I thought in the discussion that the politicians from the other political parties, they were a bit more nice to me than they were towards him. And that I actually got a bit annoyed about, because I think that you should be as harsh against a woman as against a man, because if you're just trying to be kinder to someone because it's a woman, then you're not taking that woman really seriously. So that's something that I've been thinking a lot about. The time when they will be just as hard against women as against men in the political discussion, then we'll have more equality. The situation now in Sweden is that actually 3 of the 4 right-wing parties have a young woman mother as the party leader. And maybe the 4th of the 4 right-wing parties will have that in a few years' time. So maybe I hope that I have sort of laid the basis so that more young women can consider taking on the role as a leader of a political party in Sweden. I do hope so, that I have done something to encourage them to do that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's amazing all the achievements you've had in politics, starting at such a young age as well, and you're able to forge your own path forward. So you gave a lot of good tips to think about. Okay, so I'll move on to the next speaker. At this time, I'd like to invite Julia Duppre from Brazil. And Julia is a former parliamentary candidate for Rio de Janeiro. So Julia, likewise, could you please turn on your video so that we can see what you look like as you speak and make it a bit more personable. So thank you, Maria, and welcome Julia to the floor.
Like Keli said, I'm Julia. I'm from Green Party of Brazil. I have difficult to speak in English because it's not my first language. So I write something to speak for you. I don't have all history, and I feel so small after listening all the great stories about Maria and Metiria. I also I'm a mother of twins, so Maria, I understand what you say about trying to be a political and mother and a wife and a daughter. So it's for me too. I spend more time sometimes with politicals, and I left my children, and now I regret of this. I didn't have to choose from the Green Party the most of time because I miss the first step, I miss the first word, because for me at the time was important for me to choose the Green Party. But now I feel what I miss, so I regret so much. It's because I think Maria, you have a beautiful story, and I think more women have to be courage to choose the family, the children, than the political life. So I will read what I prepared to talking for you, for all you guys, because like I said, my English is not perfect. So I'm being in the Green Party since I have 90 years old. My mother and my father was founding the Green Party here in Rio, and I was elected the first representative of Women's Federation of the Green Parties of the Americas. And I want here to thanks of the women, the federation that they have courage to create a secretary of women in the Federation of America. It's very hard because here we have a members very don't like the I come back to read because, well, and then I want to apologize for the mistakes of pronunciation or grammar of English. It is important to point out that I need the experience of exchange of green women around the world to help occupy positions of power by green women in America. These are our main objectives because we women support us and overcome the barriers imposed by the male world of the power. Here in America is very strong, this. And for create this politics for women here in America, we have the same problem that the federations, because here in Americas, the first barrier is the language, because it's the small part of America speak English and French, and the most of America speak Spanish and Portuguese. So how to solve this? How to create the communication? They ask me why I have to learn English, and why the members of the United States can learn Portuguese and Spanish. So it's a problem. And another problem is geographical, that I think, because we all here are Americans, all Americans. We have the North America, the Central America, and the South America. We are not Latin America, no, yeah, we are all America. So it's so hard to try to explain this for the United States or Canada, because for them, America is only them upstairs, and downstairs is nothing. But I saw one journalist one time interview one rock band and say, you going now to South America, and the show will be in Mexico. Mexico is North America, it's not Central America, it's not South America. Mexico is North. So we have this problem here, and all this, imagine, interfere with our routine, because in school we have to share history from United States. We have here to learn how to create a system feed, to make food for United States. So we have this problem here. So, então, here in Brazil, we have 27 states. And the woman of national leadership is Shirley. She's from Acre, and here from rainforest for you. And yesterday we have a meeting here in Brasilia, and with the 27 woman leadership, because here each state have one secretary to work with all the women of the states. Brazil is very big, so we have to create these spaces for everything. Everybody can work. And the point here is election now for major and for how to speak. Speak here. Alderman, I think is the word. So I try to, and so the job here is create spaces and form and speak with women to occupy spaces of the Green Party space in the cities to that. I also have the company in support of the delegates of the Brazilian Federation, who's Carla, Sandra of United States, Matilde for Guatemala, Margot of Bolivia, Maria Isabel of Colombia, Flor of Peru, and Tati from Mexico. We are all together in federation to trying the women for occupy position of power. So to change the way to make politics here, but it's so hard because the spaces, like Maria said, if you have children, if you have a husband, you have to spend so much time to compete with men here. So I don't. Like I said before, I feel so small because I have a few histories for speaking for all of you. Is not compared for the two others that are speakers before me. So I try to run a few days, but with twins, and my twins have at the time 5 years old, so it's too small, and I have to run all the Rio de Janeiro states with her inside the car and speak up to the people to vote for me. So it's very hard, and I feel today like Veronica. My birthday is a present for me, speaking to all of you and listen the same history, the same problem that and I feel that I'm not alone, and I feel stronger to run for my dream that I see Brazil and all the Americas, all the green Americas with sustainability here and equality and freedom, real freedom. It's all that the world can say. Freedom for my body, freedom for my mind, freedom of space to run, to choose. So here we are running for this, and we are forming this leadership, this woman. But a few women have the courage to make like like I did, to take the children a little away and trying to create spaces inside the party. So I feel very, very glad to be here. Thank you, Margaret. I think that the message that I can say to you because right now we have a male way to make politics, and we women have another way to make politics. We have love, we have, and I say here because we have gender equality, because we form children, we educated our children, so we have the job to change the world with these kids, and now I see that, and this is my regret, and I try to spend more time with my children to put this little seed inside her. They're still here, running here. So thank you all. I'm sorry if my English is not. I'm studying. I promise. The other conference, I will be much better in my English to speak for all of you better. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Merja. I'm sorry. Thank you.
And thank you, Julia. I'm really glad that you could join us, and thank you for having the courage to speak in what is, I think, your third language, if not, perhaps you speak more languages. So you're really impressive. And in the future, we'll have webinars in different languages, in Spanish and in French and maybe Chinese and maybe Portuguese. So as a Global Greens, we should really find ways to overcome the language barrier, but I could understand you very clearly. And I'm really happy to see that Robinah just joined us. She's our fourth speaker, but what we had discussed before the call was that I would read her statement, and she'll participate on the chat to answer any questions or add additional comments. That's right, she just added into the chat to all participants saying that she's available and she can hear very clearly, so she can engage with the conversation in writing. Robinah, she explains that my journey started when I was elected as Vice President of EPU in 2010, and later as the Green Party of Uganda's President. I chaired meetings and built capacity of members as well as the party. I was later elected as Treasurer of the African Green Federation and then Secretary General of the East African Green Federation. In 2016, I contested as a parliamentary candidate for Kawempe North constituency in Uganda national elections in a race that was dominated by 5 men against 1 woman. I was the chief challenger of the incumbent MP. The challenges include commercialization of politics, financial constraints, intimidation, ignorance of the electorate about what to expect from leaders. The election was characterized by vote buying, bribery, and intimidation, including on the election eve, the incumbent member of parliament paid voters each 1,000 Ugandan shillings in order to be re-elected. It is very challenging as a woman in politics. The intimidation, financial constraints, and cultural norms still dominate people's mindsets that women are not supposed to compete with men in politics. In order to overcome the challenges, I intend to establish more networks for financing, mentorship, and social support, as well as participation in civic education of the electorate on what to expect from their leaders. And that concludes Robinah's prepared statement.